After the death of Pope Francis on the 21st of April, the Holy See is now due to choose a new pontiff. Whoever goes on to succeed Francis will be at the helm of a Christian denomination followed by more than 1.4 billion people around the world. The Pope is one of the most powerful people in the world, so it's very important who holds the title, even if you're not Catholic. The Vatican operates the massive hierarchy that is the Catholic Church, which is an ingrained part of the culture in many countries, even if just amongst minority communities. In this video, I will go through the 15 most likely contenders to be the next Pope. Why are there so many? Well, honestly, it's because the process is so opaque and mysterious that it's hard to really know which way it'll go. So let's quickly go through this process, actually. The process for selecting a new pope is called a conclave. In a conclave, cardinals, who are senior members of the church, which are selected by the past popes to be on the College of Cardinals, come to the Vatican City where they're cut off from society until they vote in a new pope. They are sworn to secrecy both during and after the process. There are currently 252 cardinals, but only cardinals under the age of 80 can vote, limiting the number to 135 this time around. In theory, any Catholic man can be made the next pope, but in practice it will be one of the 252 cardinals. Candidates, who are cardinals considered contenders, are referred to as papabile, popable. The Pope must win with a 2/3 majority. If this does not happen in the first round of voting, subsequent votes will be held until it does happen. These proceedings are led by the Dean of the College of Cardinals, currently Giovanni Battista Re. After each vote, the public is informed whether the cardinals have managed to select the Pope. This is communicated using smoke signals. Black smoke if no candidate wins, and finally white smoke when a candidate does. The newly elected Pope then steps out onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica and delivers an address to onlookers. Let's now finally get to the candidates themselves. With this small electorate, large field of potential candidates, and the secrecy of the process, it is no wonder it is really hard to know who actually stands a chance of being the next Pope. Pope Francis was by all means a bit of a surprise, but his predecessor Pope Benedict was maybe less so. So there must be some merit to media predictions. That's why I have sifted through speculations of almost 50 different media sites from around the world, which gave me a slate of 47 candidates, which I have now narrowed down to the top 15 most mentioned and predicted candidates. I've split these 15 papabile into 3 categories: the frontrunners, who appear on almost every list, the contenders, who appear on almost half the lists, and the dark horses, who make irregular but considerable appearances on the lists. If the next pope isn't one of my 15, I don't know what to say. Blame the world's media, not me. So let's start with the frontrunners. The first frontrunner is Pietro Parolin. Pietro Parolin is the Italian 70-year-old Secretary of State for the Vatican. This is essentially a foreign minister type role, dressed up as a prime minister type role. This has put Parolin at the heart of many decisions and negotiations undertaken recently. He is especially being tied to the controversial and delicate negotiations the Vatican has been engaged in with China. And let's just say relations between these two countries have not historically been especially good. Parolin is considered a moderate candidate and somewhat of a continuity candidate, despite being less liberal than Francis. His close association with Francis could boast well for his chances, though, as Francis appointed most of the voting cardinals at this conclave. Péter Erdő. Péter Erdő is the Hungarian 72-year-old Archbishop of Esztergom, Budapest, and former president of the Council of the Bishops' Conference of Europe, effectively an association of Catholic leaders in Europe. Erdő is this conclave's conservative candidate, coming out strong against divorce and refugees. He has seemed to be chummy with the right-wing Viktor Orban government in Hungary. Reporting earlier this year indicated the US administration was hoping to be able to put some pressure onto cardinals and get a more conservative, Trump-friendly pope. Erdő is probably that candidate. Luis Antonio Tagle. Luis Antonio Tagle is the Filipino 67-year-old pro-prefect for the section of First Evangelization of the Dicastery for Evangelization, which is common parlance means he leads the Vatican's projects in expanding the church to traditionally non-Catholic parts of the world. Tagle previously served as the Archbishop of Manila, serving the Philippines' massive Catholic population and representing a push for a Catholic church that spans wider than just the European and the Latin world. If he became the next pope, Tagle would be the first ever Asian pope. Tagle is considered very politically similar to Pope Francis, with him being one of the more liberal candidates, speaking more positively about divorce and homosexuality, though he still does oppose abortion. Matteo Zuppi. Matteo Zuppi is the 69-year-old Archbishop of Bologna and president of the Episcopal Conference of Italy, an association of Italian bishops. He was closely associated with Pope Francis, who asked him to lead a peace envoy to Ukraine. This led Zuppi to high-profile meetings with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and US President Joe Biden. Zuppi is considered one of the more liberal candidates as well, having spoken inclusively of homosexuality, and he's clashed publicly with right-wing politics, leading to conflicts with Italian Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini. And that's it for the frontrunners. Smart money would perhaps be on one of these four, but there are many others getting attention. So let's now look at the second tier, the contenders. Mario Grech. Mario Grech is the Maltese 68-year-old Secretary General of the Synod of Bishops, an organization that fosters bishop-pope cooperation. He has been generally praised for using this position to make the church more consultative of bishops. Grech used to be rather conservative, but has over the past decade moved to be more liberal, supporting inclusivity of homosexuals and advocating for inclusion of women as deacons in the church. Grech has argued that his changing stances represent personal growth rather than flip-flopping, but this personal growth did come at an opportune time when becoming more liberal meant a higher chance of being given a good position and perhaps a cardinalship by the very liberal Pope Francis. Peter Turkson. Peter Turkson is the Ghanaian 76-year-old Chancellor of the Pontifical Academies of Sciences, essentially managing a Vatican think tank on sciences. There's been a lot of talk around this conclave, perhaps electing the first African pope since the 5th century, especially due to the growing Catholic movement in Africa and the more international College of Cardinals voting in this conclave. And Turkson seems to be the likeliest of the African papabile. He's something like a left-wing conservative. Left-wing in his more openly socialist views, but conservative in his views on homosexuality and contraception. Pierbattista Pizzaballa. Pierbattista Pizzaballa is the Italian 60-year-old Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, essentially the Archbishop of Jerusalem. This is a unique position where he's really managed to make a significant name for himself. Pope Francis was notably very sympathetic to Palestine in the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. Pizzaballa was Francis' cardinal on the ground, who has proven an understanding of the conflict and walked the line very carefully between supporting the plight of Palestinians without endorsing Hamas. He also condemned the October 7th attack and offered himself in a hostage swap to bring back Israeli hostages. He would likely be a bit of a Pope Francis continuity candidate. And although he's young at 60, I think the media are sleeping on his chances. I think his chances of being a contender are pretty decent. Fridolin Ambongo Besungu. Fridolin Ambongo Besungu is the Congolese 65-year-old Archbishop of Kinshasa. His mission has been exceptionally dangerous, threatened by jihadist groups and being in conflict with the government of the DRC. Much like Peter Turkson, while he advocates for helping the poor, he's very socially conservative, strongly opposing homosexuality, and having marked himself as a bit of an African thought leader on this issue. Besungu has been part of the excitement around a potential African pope, the first one since the 5th century. With growing Catholicism around Africa, cardinals like himself have been accredited with this growth. Jean-Marc Aveline. Jean-Marc Aveline is the French 66-year-old Archbishop of Marseille. Some reports indicate that Aveline was Pope Francis's favorite potential successor. He is a bit of a moderate, or perhaps more of a compromiser, which may prove helpful if he can manage to bridge a gap between the liberals and conservatives to form a bit of a coalition around himself. He was born in Algeria and serves in the very multi-ethnic French city of Marseille, making him a more appealing candidate for cardinals from the global south, who could potentially see him bridging an ethnic and cultural gap as well. Robert Serra. Robert Serra is the Ghanaian 79-year-old who was formerly the prefect of the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments. Essentially, he was responsible for standardization of masses and baptisms across the world. Sarah is one of 3 candidates from Africa during a conclave that has received a lot of media speculation about whether it will lead to the first African pope since the 5th century. Sarah is very socially conservative, especially regards to LGBT issues, but has also come out strong against attacks on Islam and Muslim countries by the global north. Sarah was considered a papabile at the last conclave when Pope Francis was elected, so is it perhaps too late for him to become pope now? Now let's turn our attention to the dark horses. Robert F. Prevost. Robert F. Prevost is the American 69-year-old prefect of the dicastery for bishops, which makes him the head of the department of the Vatican responsible for selecting and appointing bishops. He is considered a bit of a moderate, with perhaps mildly conservative views on social issues such as abortion and homosexuality, but he's often referenced as being a compromiser and someone who can work with both sides. As one of 3 main American candidates, his chances will be hindered by the fact that the prospect of a pope from the United States is still not particularly popular. Raymond Leo Burke. Raymond Leo Burke is the American 76-year-old retired former prefect of the Supreme Tribunal of the Apostolical Signatura, essentially the Vatican's Chief Justice. He is an arch-conservative and has been a vocal critic of both Pope Francis and former US President Joe Biden on same-sex marriage, divorce, and particularly with relation to Biden, abortion. Reporting indicates a genuine feud between Burke and Pope Francis, which is probably not going to help him at the conclave. Additionally, the fact that there is a massive hesitancy around an American pope obviously further hurts him. Joseph W. Tobin. Joseph W. Tobin is the American 72-year-old Archbishop of Newark, who is considered a very liberal candidate, supporting LGBT communities, women in the church, migrants, and opposing the death penalty. He is considered a bit of a liberal thought leader in the American Catholic Church, though he may perhaps be too liberal to get elected. And it doesn't help that the conclave is always hesitant to consider an American pope. Tobin has also faced controversy due to the high-profile Theodore McCarrick sexual assault scandal that he was reportedly aware of but chose to ignore until it was picked up by the media. Marc Ouellet. Marc Ouellet is the Canadian 80-year-old retired former prefect of the dicastery for bishops, where he was responsible for selecting and appointing bishops. Before that, he was Archbishop for Quebec. At the age of 80, he is too old to vote in the conclave, but he could still be elected pope regardless. He is considered to be somewhere between moderate and conservative. His most liberal policy is around expanding the role of women within the church, though not by introducing female priests. In 2022, he was hit by a sexual harassment lawsuit with a woman claiming he massaged her, slid his hand down her back, and kissed her. Although the Vatican dismissed the case, this could very well hurt his chances, especially given his strong views on maintaining celibacy requirements. Annas Arborelius. Annas Arborelius, the Swedish 75-year-old Bishop of Stockholm, is the first ever cardinal from Scandinavia to be appointed to the college, after Pope Francis did so in 2017. Arborelius has made a bit of a name for himself over the past few years due to his involvement with political issues in Sweden, particularly with regard to his support for open migration, which much of Sweden has recently soured on. He also spoke out against recent Quran burnings, protests, and a surge in gang violence committed by Middle Eastern and African immigrants. Though the Protestant-heavy Scandinavia is not necessarily a natural fit for the homestead of a pope, so it would be a massive surprise if he did end up being selected. Those are, with my somewhat extensive sifting through the world media, the most likely 15 candidates to succeed Pope Francis. But, as I said, literally any Catholic man could in theory be made Pope. And I found an additional 32 papabile, though most of them very infrequently mentioned. Thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. Don't forget to hit like, comment, and hit that subscribe button below. It really means a lot to me. Thank you. Goodbye.